We're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming. The first person we have today is Economic Development, and we have the Commissioner, Chris Kaminsky.
Good morning.
Chris.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I am just going to, since we had the big budget last week, I talked about it all, I'm going to sort of stay the spiel about what we do. I think we all know that. I'm just going to go off your tracking sheet and just go through the cuts that are there and try to explain the best I can why.
Okay. And do you mind if we ask questions as you go along?
You can ask as many questions as you want.
It'll be easier as we go along.
You know me. I'm going to be done pretty quick on my stuff, so you have plenty of time to answer questions whenever you want.
Okay.
But I do want to say, to start off with, 83% of our budget's marketing or personnel. So it's a fairly straightforward cut, so I'll go through it quickly. We had some common changes in 22.0, just adjustments in liability premiums, et cetera. We did, in the administration part, reduce funds for operating expenses by $50,000, and we also took two vacant positions away at the tune of sort of $74,000.
Were those positions filled or just empty vacant?
Empty vacant.
Okay.
Film, video, and music, we reduced some marketing, $38,000 from there. Personnel there, they're spread thin. They're doing a great job, obviously. The film industry is growing, so we just took some marketing dollars away. Be honest with you, they got more business than they can do right now.
Well, that's just a small percentage of your marketing. But how much is your marketing budget for films?
John?
Film marketing budget with that cut will be $257,000.
$257,000.
Okay.
It's good to have John around.
Uh-huh.
Global commerce, we reduced funds for contractual services we were using, and also, again, marketing $100,000. Innovation technology. Except for the first line, most of this is regarding the Georgia Research Alliance and the Georgia Cancer Coalition, which is now part of the Georgia Research Alliance. These cuts were given by them. Susan Shows is here in case you have any questions about that. I'd rather defer to her on it since it's pretty much all GRA stuff. So if anyone has any questions, I'm sure Susan will be happy to answer them.
Haven't we moved part of the Cancer Coalition to public health?
Not yet, but I think that's part. Is that that's a core group that we're moving over to public health? FY14 we're doing it.
Okay.
And that's the core centers around the state that do trials.
We have a real good Cancer Coalition in South Georgia.
Yes.
And
but that's in 2014. But small minority business development, a small percentage was reduced for operating expenses there. And then tourism, we had two vacant positions that were eliminated, contractual services reduction, and marketing as well. It pretty much mirrored what we did in global commerce. And then lastly, the Georgia Medical Center Authority, that's pass through from other areas, so they just simply, we just write the check to them. It's a pass through. And that's really the extent of our stuff in the amended budget. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I had sort of a question.
Sure.
I just sort of wondered. In the global commerce, what contracts did y'all cut? That's one of your biggest cuts.
It is. We had some contractual services, and John, you can correct me, but we had some work with people that were still doing the Kia work, the land work, a lot of the engineering work. It was two people, but as it sort of evolved out of it, we kept them around to some small extent for bigger projects like Baxter and others when it comes to engineering, just so we have somebody to help us not do all the work, but make sure that we're using it to best our ability and helping us with some of the lower level stuff and making sure that the higher level engineering is done correctly. But that's really what it is.
Yeah. Okay. And
if it comes back up, if we had another major mega project, I'm sure we will have to find some money for contractual, but we don't feel
come up with another key and we'll find some money.
Absolutely. If you can, I will.
You come up with it. All right. The next thing under tourism.
Yes,
tourism is pretty big, and you're doing a great job with tourism, and I know how important that is in the state. The two positions, were they just vacant positions you didn't fill, or what two positions?
They were vacant positions that were out there. Now, to be honest, we gave our 3% cuts to the governor's office, and they obviously, when we have no problem with it, needed to find some more, and they took the vacant positions away.
Okay.
But again, we'll make do, we'll manage. In both global commerce and tourism right now, we are doing our best as people leave is to try to consolidate as best as possible without making sure services are make sure they're still serving the areas, but trying to find some consolidation efforts. We did it in global commerce in the Macon area, and then Rhonda Geiger down in Southwest Georgia, we're working on there. But we are making sure as we consolidate, it's not a permanency. It's something that we are open if we're not covering something. We're dealing with, in fact, I was talking to Chairman Sinyard from Doherty County last night, just talking about the fact that as we have some consolidations, please know that you need to let us know if something's not working, and we're going to fix it.
Well, I know people in the Plantation Trace have been sort of upset that the tourism person has gone.
It's been a mixed bag. If you go down to Moultrie, they'll tell you they love it. They love Rhonda. They know her.
Oh,
they
I
think
love
it's a great.
Rhonda.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
And it's not. I know it's not. And some people feel like they need a body. Now, let me explain a couple things we did in tourism. And again, I am telling everybody, I want everyone to understand this. If we're finding holes, we're going to fill them. We're going to fix them. I promise. But what we did this year with tourism is, and again, as people vacate, sometimes it's by area, but we have decided that so much of what they were doing, those reps, was data entry for the Georgia travel guide. So we got 2 data entry people, because that was 70% of some of their work. Because we want our folks to focus more on product development. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to go down to areas around the state, help them with what they see and say, here's what you should be selling in tourism, or giving advice if they want it. In fact, Plantation Trace has been 30% of that out of all the regions. So we are sort of taking a lot of, hopefully, work away from people where we will be able to see some consolidation in areas. But if it's not going to work, and there are some people upset, and there's some people that like it, I've asked, again, Chairman Sinyard, Darrell Moore, and others to try to sit down in March and let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do. If there is a hole, we will fix it. Maybe it's a different level person. I think Rhonda's done a very good job. I think you've got some information. Plantation Trace has actually been one of our busiest tourism spots in terms of what we've done in the last year. A lot of that's because we care about Southwest Georgia. We understand they are in a hard part of the state right now. That's why we're doing the quail hunt next week, to make sure we show it off. And I love going down there and doing it. And it's the only event we do in the Department of Economic Development that's done the same location every year. And trust me, there's other parts of the state that are very jealous of that. But we are keeping our eye on it. I promise you that. And if we have holes, we will fix them.
All right, thank you so much, and I apprate the job you're doing. You're doing a great
Thank
job,
you.
and we're real pleased.
Thank you all. Anything else?
Any questions? Okay, Mr. Mayo, Representative Mayo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Comiskey, thanks for being here. I've heard a lot of great things about you and the work you all are doing with economic development. And I've had some conversations lately. I hear a lot about the tax credit, the film and television tax credit, which I'm very excited about. I think it's a good tool for our state to attract more business in that industry. One thing that I've discussed recently with someone is the post-production opportunities that we really haven't gone after to create some permanent jobs. So we've got a lot of film and TV production going on, but I think we're missing the opportunity, and correct me if I'm wrong, with post-production business to keep some of those companies here to do business long-term in Georgia. And I want to know from you what we can do to attract some of that business.
I don't want to say I disagree with the premise, but to an extent I do disagree with the premise. We have Screen Gems, a production company up that's growing at Lakewood. I cannot tell you the name, but in 2 weeks we're going to have another major production company putting up roots here in Georgia. We're going to have another one, I believe, soon after that, putting up roots all in different places down in southeast Georgia. So it's growing, and that was the whole principle. We had to get the people here on the production side first to prove to the post-production companies that we are going to have a viable industry in Georgia. And what we've seen, thanks to you all and the legislation you've passed, is a $248 million activity 5 years ago, which is now $3.1 billion. So companies are doing post-production here. You know, in terms of, I know some people will say that we need to give incentives like we do for the film industry in production side and post-production. I think it would bankrupt the state, quite honestly. I really do. They're going to follow production companies. If we continue to make the production companies happy, we will see post-production here. So, no, it's not on pace with the production companies, but it never was supposed to be. It's more of a lagging indicator. As we continue to grow with production, post-production will be done here more often. So we're always open for ideas. I know there's some out there that want to do credits for it. I don't think the budget could hold it. I really don't.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. Last mile money, closing money. I've spoken to some of the economic development departments in different counties, and they've talked about that as something we may be able to offer to some large corporations that would otherwise go to some of our competitive states. And I'm wondering if there is money in the budget or any future plans to increase the amount of last mile money to incentivize some of these groups.
The legislature and the governor, in their wisdom last year, gave us a large sum. Not a sum that was supposed to be spent in 1 year. This year, because of cash flow issues and others, they came to the department and said, we want to make sure you have enough money to close the deals this year, but is it okay if we take some of that money for our cash flow purposes in the amended budget? We will re-put it back in there at later dates. we have plenty of ample money. Compared to 3-4 years ago where we were a little thin in that area, our state's now very competitive. People have seen cuts, if you look at the budget, not understanding it all, and not from you all's perspective, but from some of the economic developers' perspectives in the state. I can see why they think we're taking major cuts. It's really not. We have enough money to continue operations in an aggressive manner like we have been the last 2 years, and we will have so. And the governor and the legislatures have simply asked us, is it okay to shift the money maybe down the road a little bit? Again, we got $100+ million last year, and although I love to spend it in 1 year, I'm fairly certain you all would not be happy if I did. So that's the story there. But we're trying to get that message out there because the papers reported it, I thought, in a different light than it should have been, and our folks are making sure local economic developers understand that, and they should. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
all very
coming.
much. Appreciate it.
The next is agriculture.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's good to see you today.
And I think we all know who this is, but it's Commissioner Blank, Gary Blank, in case
Yes, ma'am.
you did not recognize him.
We're good to go. And I'm
No.
there, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the privilege of being here today. And Madam Chair, I thought I would start. We'll stick close to the tracking document too, because I know y'all got a busy afternoon. But a couple of introductory remarks, if you'd allow me. First, and I'm not trying to give instruction to the committee whatsoever, but just as a reminder, there may be members of the committee that don't know. From a program budgeting standpoint, when you look at the tracking document, we have 3 program areas, but we have some attachments to us, and I think they've got other. There's the Agricultural Exposition Authority, and then the Poultry Veterinary and the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratories. They're not under our supervision, but they're attached to us for budget purposes. And I think, Madam Chair, you're going to be hearing from some of them along the way somewhere. But I'll be speaking to the three program areas of Consumer Protection, Department Administration, and the Marketing and Promotion. One thing I'm happy to report to you today is that since we started program budgeting back in 2005, for the first time ever, your Department of Agriculture in 2012, the FY 2012, we were in full compliance with OPB. We had a practice along the way, but never really acknowledged that practice. But we have got the house of this department in order with regards to our budget, and our Chief Financial Officer, Sherry Foster, and her team deserve a big. We made that a priority early on because I expect you expect us to be in compliance, so we now are. One of the two things, another thing too, that with regards to budgeting, and you've heard me say this a time or two, but prior to you approving or expecting or establishing a policy on zero-based budgeting, we had already begun. We completed one leg of our stool last year before last, and one last year, and we're on the third leg this year, in regards to completely, renovating and getting on a firm footing of identifying everything this department does from the zero-based budgeting standpoint. So we feel good about our report there. And actually, some of the things we did a year ago in planning helped us absorb the cuts that were necessary for this year. So from a management standpoint, we've talked a lot about a management and business plan for this department, so we seem to be on track there, and I'm very thankful for our team and the progress we've made. Would remind, from a standpoint of a couple of the adjustments that you see this time with regards to specific. Before we get to the actual cuts that we identified, you do see a couple of adjustments. One being. So there's a $472,000 adjustment that is tied to zero-based budgeting and the program budgeting of the department. Last year the money was appropriated, but it was all the $472 that you see as an add back. It's not new funds. It's actually an adjustment during 13 because that money was appropriated to consumer protection, but it actually should have been in marketing, and that was just an OPB oversight. So. There's not that's a wash as far as the bottom line, but that was the last step to get us in full compliance with OPB. As far as budget trends, Madam Chair, we 4 years ago this department, if you combined all the state funds and our fees that were at that time and our federal funds, this budget for this department was $58 million. We stand before you today $10 million less than we were 4 years ago. From an employee count, which I'm proud of our team and how we've come together again with our business plan. 2 years ago, stood before you with 630 employees. We're about 575 today. I think we are leaner. I think we're smarter. I think we're better. I think we're doing a better job of customer service. And so all of that, as far as our employee count's real strong and real comfortable. I think we're about at fighting weight, quite frankly. But we do look at our income and revenue in order to support this team is something that's always a challenge. But we've got you a good balanced budget for and for these adjustments for FY13. Fee trends may be something to point out to you too, and then I'll get these specific line items, Madam Chair.
Okay, one thing I want
Yes,
you to sort of explain. We've got a lot of new people on the
Yes,
committee, and you've done a real good job about consolidating office space.
Yes, ma'am.
And I noticed that you, in this budget, you've consolidated about $175,000 in office space. Do you anticipate being able to consolidate any more money, any more office space, or?
Madam Chair, we're about, like I said, from a fighting weight standpoint, we're about where we need to be.
About where you need to be.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Now-
and I
now-
commend you on that
Thank you, ma'am.
savings. That's a big savings.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well,
Now,
we've
one
got
thing.
a question from
One thing that would be very helpful, if I could, on the office space, and just talk. Don't want to commit the director of Environmental Protection Division. He does his own committing, and he'll be visiting with somebody. But he and I were talking just yesterday. He has a possibility of some office adjustments down at the airport. And one of the things that's been looming on us in this building across the way, we're in the first floor, second floor, third floor, and then we skip the fifth, where some old labs that we moved to Tifton, and they're just sitting there idle, but they're on our books. And then we go to the sixth floor with our food safety and dairy labs. It'd be a great thing, and Judd thinks he has an opportunity to consolidate some more of his staff and possibly go to the fifth floor with some of the EPD labs. Now, if they pull all that off, that will be our kind of final deal, unless we renovate all those spaces, which is, I learned from Steve Stansel today, is about a $2 million proposition that I'm not interested in today. But I'd love to see some new tenants when we get that off our books and on somebody else's.
Well, you've done a good job doing
Thank you,
that, and
ma'am.
I commend you.
Thank you.
Representative Roberts.
Well, I was going to ask about your fees, about the
Yes, sir.
1055 fees. You want to talk
Yes, sir.
about them?
Yes, sir.
Where are we at with those? Did they take, as far as in the budgeting process, where are we at with the 1055 fees? Did they
Yes, sir.
cut those?
Yes, sir. That's been an interesting process. And Madam Chair, it might be, because I get to talking about lingo. I call 1055 too for the purpose. I don't know if other members remember. That was 2010.
Mm-hmm.
We passed House Bill 1055, which our situation in that budget year it was before my time, but $13 million in cash was removed off of our books of state funds. And then the premise was, and the law said, that for us to raise our fees and go through all the plethora of fees and licenses that the department has, and at that juncture, I think, Sherry, it was estimated about 10.8, somewhere along in there, that we could raise, and we've about hit that mark. About that was a good number back then from a guess. And but the law said we were to keep those fees in order to run the department. It was pretty plain. Now, of course, that's not constitutional,
Right.
and the auditor wrote us up about that my first 6 months of being here. And I said, well, look, it's either the law or the how do we do this? So we started getting the appropriations process correct last year, and worked out pretty fine. But this past fiscal year, we closed out. We collected 10.7 in fees, somewhere along in there, and we got 10.8, and we got back a little over 10. I think we were short $851,000 that was not appropriated back to us.
So we cut, or OPB cut you $850,000 of the fees.
Now, we asked for that back during this process, and we've had very constructive dialogue with everyone involved, and I appreciate what we've got. But that your specific answer to your question is it was $851 for the past year, and I think it's still important to realize that in technical terms those are state funds now, because that's what's been. They were set up as other funds first, and we kept them by the law, but then by the constitutional requirements, we started remitting those funds, waiting for them to be appropriated back. And so at the close of business for FY12, we were $851 short.
But the whole purpose behind House Bill 1055 and the fees in your area that we raised were not to raise more revenue, but just to actually start trying to cover the cost
I remember
of what it was to the department. So
I remember that being the stated purpose of House Bill 1055.
So in other words, we were trying to get you up in your budgetary process to where it just actually covered the cost, and now we're not even giving you that money back to cover that cost, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. But we hope, Madam Chair, I will put another exclamation point on some of the things that we did last year with our strategic planning and our zero-based budgeting. It did help us fill these holes better, because closing down, shrinking our footprint, cross-training individuals when we had some slots open, and actually that helped. But our one of our the greatest challenges moving forward is just simply being able to be competitive in the marketplace so that we have good people, and we hope one day we're going to be able to address that. But let me, Madam Chair, if I could address just the three program budget items that I think are the standouts. Consumer protection. We've been able to take this cut because we're leveraging a few more federal dollars, been a little more aggressive in that area over to our motor vehicle budget. We've continued to cross-train individuals. We've reduced our footprint. And in marketing and promotion, maybe a good example, we own the Vidalia. For members of the committee, you may not know, but the department, the state of Georgia, actually owns the Vidalia trademark. And if you're a processor of Vidalia onions, and use those in a salad dressing or something, it's paid into a royalty fund that we manage to defend the trademark. Well, we've had one staff person that's done that for a long time, and he's been a state employee paid for with state funds, though 75% of his job was Vidalia onion. So one of the ways we've been able to absorb and move forward for 13 and for 14 is this person needs to be paid out of the Vidalia onion royalty fund. And so it's basically a business supported activity, though he's still a state employee. So that's one of the highlights in marketing promotion. And we continue to have our Modernization Act with technology investments and adjustments of workloads with people, and we had some good savings in the mailroom, Madam Chair, this year that you can see identified. That's about $142,000 for this term. We did have $65,000 that was noted, I believe, in consumer protection for reduction of funds that we did not identify. But again, that was not in our original proposal. That was an add through the budget process. So. But we're passionate about our employees, Madam Chair. You know that, and everyone's been very empathetic about some of the challenges we have and trying to have career paths for people. You and I've discussed, I think, that I have some fuel inspector positions right now that I'm advertising for $1,668 a month. I have some meat inspection, which is very important for public health and all of us, and integrity in the marketplace for our producers, and we're advertising several positions right now. which has a real college degree preference for somebody in that area, and we're advertising that, I think, about $2,200 a month. And we've had very patient people that I think a lot of. This is a skilled workforce, and I'm hoping that we can all work together to help them. They're helping you and I every day. They're working hard, and they're outstanding public servants. And if that's kind of what our plans were in the 1055 range, is to take and manage the business. But when we're managing the expense side of the P&L and have difficulty, don't have the management of the revenue side, it does make that makes that a challenging proposition. But we're here to serve, and we're going to meet the needs of the citizens of Georgia with the budget that you pass out, and just appreciate the opportunity to be here. Gate, there's Gate. We're up to 21,500 in the Gate program, and you are returning those funds to us, those fees in the supplemental, and we appreciate that. It's about $350,000, I think.
We have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
22.
Commissioner, the other day when we were in the ag hearings or the budget hearings,
Yes, sir.
we talked a little bit about the 20,000 that you had already submitted, and looking at the possibility of another $18,000 more, and brought up the fact that some have multiple cards, so that number might be inflated a little bit. And you said that y'all were going to look at that and see if you could go back and have y'all got any more data on that as far as cross-referencing it? See.
Yes, sir, and we've got some. I don't have it on the tip of my
Sure.
tongue. We did go back after you and I talked. Here's for members of the committee. If you remember last year, under the sales tax legislation, we took all the sales tax exemptions for agricultural production, and they were in that big omnibus piece of legislation. A couple of new things that were added, parts and off-road fuel, those kind of things. But by and large, the same packages have been on the books for a couple of generations. And then with that, you instructed us to be the keeper of that. Producers had to meet a $2,500 means test to prove that they were a real farmer. And they've gotten those cards from us. That's what we've gotten out, 21,000 of them now. 84% of that has been done online, so we're not handling paper, which has been a real blessing. But to Chairman Roberts' question, a lot of us thought there might be 50 or 60,000 of these cards out there. And we're trying to predict, because no one really knew. There are 49,000 farms, and they might have multiple entities that would qualify. And so we really thought there might be 50 or 60,000 of these cards out here. We're standing here today with this morning, we only did 46 this morning. We've reduced our call center by half already. And as far as the number of temporary folks we've had up there. So I can tell you right now, I think there's probably 30,000 cards top out there. I just don't think there's that many more out there. And so I think the point you're trying to make is when we were all alarmed and some people thought we were giving the store away last year, the facts are I think it's I don't think it's that way at all. I think we're really getting it down to where it's real farmers that are getting these sales tax exemptions, when in the past it may have just been everybody buying, didn't make a difference whether you were a farmer or not. You're buying a bag of feed, the feed was exempt. And so by putting the means test to be really producers, I think our fiscal note's a lot better than some people thought it was last year. Does that answer you?
I've got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how many cards did you say you issued today?
About 21,500.
I mean, today.
Today?
Uh-huh.
This morning session was just real slow. There was 46 before lunch.
46. But how many people did it take to operate the call center?
There had been 10, and we've cut down. But, Madam Chair, what we're going to be careful. Our folks are managing this on a daily basis, because we turned 4 loose last Friday, and we've trimmed down. if there needs to be another reduction, I'm letting my managers manage that when they think the calls are going to be reduced. We may get down to 2 people rather than 10.
Well, I see we're putting $350,000 more in the supplemental in there.
Yes. Well, not more. We've implemented this whole program without a dime. That's just simply returning the dollars of those fees back to us.
Okay.
Everything I've got in that call center over there with the 10 temporary employees and my managers and all our IT investment, we did without a dime. We borrowed against in order to implement. All of those funds have been returned to the.
Okay.
Whatever's in process, it's been remitted to the Treasury.
Okay.
So we've been living off.
Well, when I just saw the 350,000, it looked like from when I'm looking at the budget that they were, putting $350,000 more.
Oh no, ma'am. There wasn't any more to add. But there was zero. We've been living off our seed corn. We've been making cornbread off our seed corn.
On the tracking sheet, it doesn't say that.
Okay. Well, it's just let me see. It says.
To increase funds for operating expenses.
Well, from the standpoint of increasing it from zero.
Okay, well, but
because
somebody when I
was
at
zero.
The tracking sheet says increase funds, so you assume
Yes, ma'am.
that they're increasing funds by $350,000.
Yes, ma'am. And I'll tell you, thus far our outlays that doesn't cover our cost. Now, once we get into 14, and I know that's later.
Yeah.
There's a $750,000 mark there because we were trying to guess at what the number would be.
Uh-huh. And you've really taken in a total of $422,910.
Yes, ma'am. And I gave you a rough number.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think I saw the other number. It's 450.
But that was this was January 19th.
Yes, ma'am. That was it's up a little bit.
19th,
It's up a little bit.
Okay. We've got some other questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Number.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Are you 25?
Von Epps.
Von Epps, I'm sorry. It's Representative Von Epps.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for the excellent job you're doing in bringing the department up to speed. I wanted to follow up on your reference to your royalties that
Yes,
you were receiving. Now, do the proceeds of those royalties come back into the state budget?
No, sir.
So that's why you are able to.
Yes, so they have a separate under the Vidalia Onion law. It's a kind of held in trust, like we use all these different terms, and it's according to which term you use as to whether it's correct or not. And so they're held kind of in trust like the commodity commissions. Those are the farmer-run commissions. It's their money. It's just we hold it in trust for them for research, promotion, and education. And the royalty is established purely for the defense of the Vidalia Onion trademark because the state of Georgia owns the trademark.
And then the follow-up question, or the second question, is the $1.1 million. Does that reflect a 3% budget cut?
Yes, sir.
It does. Okay.
Actually, a little tad more, because I think our number was $1,016,000, and then we had that we turned in that met the 3% number, and then we had a couple of additions through the process. Thank you, sir.
Representative Black.
Back to this gate tax. Can you give me some breakdown, or how much of this personnel, how much of the personnel, what percentage of them are going to be basically clerical, and how much of it is going to be auditing? And
I'm sorry, Representative Black. Would you say that one more time?
on this gate tax,
Yes, sir.
I assume there's most of that's personnel, and a percentage of that's going to be clerical. That's going to be handling, or am I off base there?
No, sir. No, I can give you the personnel breakdown because from an audit standpoint, that's Department of Revenue. That's not us. Our job is to get the cards in qualified people's hands. you know, I've got some percentages of our IT people. Now, it's more front-loaded because now we've got the system built, and it's a dream. We've had 10 people in a call center. They started a couple about November the 1st. We did extensive training, Agriculture 101, 102, and 103 for them in about 2 weeks, and they served us well. I'm telling you what, we had 10 folks from a temporary agency here in town, and we taught them agriculture fast, and every one of them, I would hire them tomorrow. That's how good they were. They were good folks, and they became a team, a little family. But then I have 2 supervisors, Bo Warren, and he's really. We wanted to put our best to make. We knew we couldn't slip. So Bo and Marie out of marketing have been doing this. This is going to kind of come back to Marie managing probably 1 or 2 part-time people, and then we would ramp up next fall, you know, starting in December when renewals start. But that we won't have any auditing, no field people, no vehicles assigned to this. It's a bare bones operation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative, remember your light's on. Did you have a question? All right.
Ron did it.
Ron did it. Okay. I have one other question, and
Yes,
you know, this 13.4.5, this Brussels office. How long is this going to keep on showing up?
No, ma'am, it's over.
It's over.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's how much you spent on the lawyers, everything.
Yes, ma'am.
It's over. Okay.
That's whatever. That was the end of that contract that was held over from.
I know it wasn't your fault. I just
No,
wanted to
ma'am.
make sure. You know, it's always been sort of a bone with me. And,
Yes, ma'am. As bad as you want it, as bad as you want to see that gone, I'm gonna put that to the power of 2.
Okay.
And that
all
is
right,
my
good.
that's
I
my
just want it
that's my.
gone. All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Thank you, and thank you for the job you're doing. Are there
Thank
any
you.
other questions?
Thank you, members.
All right.
We're happy to serve you anyway, and our
Thank you.
team's
You're doing
here.
a
Thank
great
you very
job,
much.
and we appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, we have the Georgia Agricultural Expo Authority. And it's Randy Moore.
Yes, ma'am.
Nice to have you again.
See you, Mr. Chairman.
We've got several new people here, and if you don't mind, sort of explain to the new people today, give us a little background of the new members, how the authority operates, and what your responsibilities are.
Absolutely. I'll do that. I'll talk. Ron Goldsby is our Chief Financial Officer, and he's got some handouts for y'all that with some schedules in them. It shows you all our sources of revenues, our economic impact based on visitation, annual visitation, and an average of the past 5 years. But I'll wait till Tracy gets those handed out. In your folders, if you'll note, the Agricultural Exposition Authority is charged with accomplishing 4 things. And they operate the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agri-Center in Perry, Georgia. And they are to provide the facility for an agricultural community to present, exhibit, and promote Georgia products and livestock to agribusiness persons and the public in an effort to boost the state's economy. Secondly, the exhibition and promotion of agricultural accomplishments by the youth of this state. And thirdly, to provide facilities and programs for public events, exhibits, other activities such as, but not limited to, fairs, non-agricultural exhibits, concerts, rodeos, flea markets, and auctions. And fourthly, to promote and stage a state fair for Georgia. To put it simply, to boil it down, it's an event center for Georgia, and it exists in support of 2 of the state's largest industries, agriculture and tourism. And we have historically, it's still a young program. It's I think the commission, the enabling legislation was passed in 1984, and we have just completed last year our 23rd fair, and next year will be the 24th, and of course in the economy that we have experienced the last 5 years, we remarkably have been able to increase the self-generated revenues and make up what the state has needed to diminish in their support. Also, Ms. Chairman, I would like to note one thing as well. In 2008, we reduced our staff from 86 persons to 52.
Gosh.
And we did it within a 7-month period. And the remaining staff has done an excellent job in bridging the gap and getting us to this point in time. And so we've been through this this will be the 5th budget cycle, and I'm very proud of our team's efforts to cover that gap each year.
Well, that's a big reduction in staff.
Yes, ma'am, it's around 30%.
Let's see. How many days a year do you have bookings?
Oh, let's see. I think I've got that schedule in there. I think we actually, this past calendar year, had 407 event days. I think we've got a schedule in there that actually reflects that. Well, you can see an average number of event days on this schedule.
Okay.
Right there was, for the last 5 years, we've averaged 443 event days. Now, we can, sometimes we may have 4 or 5 different events going on at one time.
Well, I know I go by that
Yes,
quite
ma'am.
often, and there's always something going on.
Good. I hope that remains that way.
And I appreciate the job you've done. Now, this tells us how much money y'all have in reserve as of 2013. Or is that your 5-year goal? Or
Yes, ma'am. Our chief financial officer did a projection with what we had hoped, our plan to, at some point, whether it's in the future or I think some consideration needs to be given to, because we do operate as a business, to allow this program to generate some capital reserves. Probably our expenses run average about $600,000 a month, and so at some point you may want to consider allowing at least a quarter's worth of revenue to be held in reserve. Each year, the fair, we invest heavily in that on the part of the behalf of the state. We typically, the last few budget cycles, have been running into the fair on fumes, and just asking the Lord to bless the work we've done, and certainly we have been fortunate in that area. Each year we've had 2 of our best attended fairs, and as you can see in this chart, that is the biggest part of our revenue source, 57.8% this past year.
now, how much do you need to keep in reserve? Tell me again.
I would say that from around $1.6 million would certainly be a worthy goal. This is something that we are fortunate that we've got 4 House members and 4 Senate members that are on our overview committee that are actively engaged in this program and interested in it, and it's something that we talk about all the time. And but we also are aware of the circumstances of the state revenues and what y'all are challenged with today, and certainly we'll continue to contribute and do whatever we're asked to do, and with a good attitude.
Representative Blank has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Randy, if you would give the rest of the committee a little bit of insight into why that reserve is needed, because The impact on this
Yeah.
event if
I'd
it
be
rains during that fair.
Well, one reason that you need to consider, or there needs to be some consideration given to that, is 10 out of the 12 months of the year we are revenue negative. Our expenses exceed the revenues that we're receiving through the bookings, through the events and that type of thing, plus what the state allotments are. October, because of the fair and our third largest event, the NBHA World Championships, which is the Barrel Horse Association, that's our best financial month. July, because we were able to attract and hopefully retain for the future the NBHA Youth World Championships that had previously been held in Jackson, Mississippi. That month has become financially a positive revenue month for us. But the fair is the engine that drives the program and allows Georgia to host all these ag events, these youth ag events, FCCLA, FBLA, it's more than 4-H and FFA, HOSA. All these student organizations are involved there, and the fair is the economic engine that pays for all those things, that are pays for the premiums, the awards for these kids and that type of thing. And it's a great laboratory for Georgia's agricultural youth, to be honest. And,
well, I appreciate the job you do, and it's always something there. Do you work any with economic development, or do y'all have your own promotional staff?
we have our own promotional staff, yes, ma'am.
So y'all don't work any with economic development?
No, ma'am, we have not, but we certainly would, and absolutely be interested in that.
Okay.
One other question.
All right.
Is that the reserve was the basis for those reductions in the amended 11 and 12 budgets? Is that not correct?
Would you repeat that, please, sir?
On this sheet right here, you've got listed the reductions in the budget and fiscal year 11 and fiscal year 12.
11.
Well, I know that I'm not sure if this answers the question, Mr. Black, but I know that we have been reduced in the last 5 budget cycles a total of $1.7 million.
Well, is that like 3%? Like you take 3% cut? Like
Now this year, in the amended budget, it is recommended. I think our reduction is around 11% in the amended.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now explain the $100,000 savings on energy investment.
Well, we were able to accomplish some retrofitting of our light fixtures throughout the arenas and office space and those things that have generated some savings for us there, and through energy efficiency, and also with the increase of the equestrian business through the NBHA show, and that's primarily the large equestrian event for us. I think we have realized some revenue growth there, so certainly that's the reason for that ability to be able to reduce us that amount.
Any other questions?
I'll ask one more on this.
Yes, sir.
Is it not correct that back here in sometime in history we had a bad weather fair and had to come back and without having a reserve had to ask for an additional appropriation?
Yes, sir. I think they had to come up here with a hat in hand and ask which bills they wanted them to pay. But yes, sir, that had. But probably about $1.4 million is worth a weekend, rain out at the fair.
1.4 million.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I appreciate the job you're doing and the people you're bringing into the state, and
yes, ma'am.
and appreciate you coming up. Are there any other questions? Is Representative Black on your overview committee?
Yes, ma'am, he is. How could you tell?
I wonder why I realized that.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Department of Community Affairs. Commissioner, I think everybody knows Commissioner Beatty.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for coming. Okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Great to be here, and I'll be brief. I'll just take about an hour and a half and cover some of this stuff. But, you know, we partner with every community in the state, and it's our mission to partner with every community to help create a climate of success. And as I look up on the panel, we've worked with all of your communities in different ways. And, you know, one of the things I kind of want to point out over the last several years, you know, we've actually closed 14 different regional offices and really streamlined. We've had about a 50% reduction in our staff. And, you know, what that does for us, it really causes us to focus on what we have to do and stay focused on what that mission is, which is work with all of you. One of the things I'm most proud of is our partnership with the regional commissions. As you know, a few years ago, we built a close partnership, and I know we could not have achieved that efficiency without that close partnership. In our housing, you know, we have the first-time home ownership program. One of the things that I think is of note, we have a AAA bond rating there, which is, I think, John, only about 8 states in the country have that. And I'm really, that gives us a low interest rate and really helps our first-time home owners. Of course, we know we do economic development, our opportunity zones, and community development, EIP, all those different things that really, I think, help every part of our state. As you look on page 6, and I'll go, Madam Chair, I'll do however you want me to. I'll kind of go through it real quick and let you know. We, on 16.21, we're privatized. You know, Keep Georgia Beautiful is one of the programs that, we're one of the few states, I think, outside of Texas, maybe we're number 2 in terms of affiliates. How many of y'all, you got your Keep Jackson County Beautiful, Keep Gwinnett Beautiful, and that partnership, Madam Chair, is really important to us because I don't want to make any of them ladies mad at me. I'm just going to have to tell you, or at y'all. So we, one of the things we've been able to do is over time, the office is located at DCA, but we have, I think, completely privatized that at this point, which we think, Madam Chair, will allow for that sustainability. But we still consider it a very close partnership with us, and we are totally engaged there.
Are those eliminating the 4 positions, are they connected with Keep Georgia Beautiful?
No, ma'am. Those are positions outside of that. So,
well, explain to me, when you say you've privatized Keep Georgia Beautiful, did the foundation give y'all money? Or?
There's a lot of different partners there, a lot of different partners that's come in, and we've done it over time. We've funded partially. I think, John, we're now in that last part of that, right, with some public funds, and now the different associations, different waste management groups, those folks, they have that association, and they're stepping up and taking care of those positions.
I think there are about 70-something counties affiliated with
Yes,
Keep
ma'am.
It Beautiful.
It is huge, and like I say, I think outside of Texas, they still have a few more counties than we do. So
and the Georgia Garden Club really does like that.
Absolutely, we love the Georgia Garden.
Georgia Federated Garden Club.
Truthfully, it's one of the most visible partnerships we have at DCA, and we covet that relationship. And all of these are field positions, but 16.61 is 16.22, there's 4 positions there, regional director position. All of those are field position, that salary plus benefits. And once again, that allows you, I tell folks, being an old football coach, instead of having a backup at every position, we've kind of had to have that swing guard or that swing linebacker to really get that right. So those positions won't be coming back. So
okay, all right, they've already been eliminated.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And on the REBA, you'll see on our 1611.1. We partner a lot. I know Commissioner Kaminsky was here. We work very closely with them. We're kind of the fullback of economic development. That we do a lot of community development. Getting communities ready for those projects that come in, and working with local government assistance. So we know that as we work with them, we do a lot of that back office work. We know there's $5 million in process. You'll see, I think it's $63 million. That's some of the money that the commissioner talked about.
Was that goes back to the state treasury?
Yes, ma'am. That's and where we're at now, we got, I think, John's roughly $5 million in process and $4 million in reserve. So as the commissioner talked about, you know, we knew that that large amount of money was going to be used over several years, so we're confident that we'll be able to finish the drill, if you will, on any of those, you know, different companies that are looking to come to Georgia. Now, there's a couple of the payments to the GFA, you know, and payments to, they'll be speaking here in just a minute. Got Kevin over there. Some of my good partners will be talking there. But that's a pass-through. The One Georgia Authority, same situation. We have $8.5 million in reserve there, Madam Chair. So, and we work very closely. All of our projects are lined up. Our staff and Commissioner Kaminsky's staff, we're working together every day, if not every hour, to make sure that we've got, you know, that those funds available to close the deal. And I think that's pretty much it. We have, you know, once again, I want to say that our partnership with the regional commissions has helped us be able to bring it down. And we're working very closely there, and I think that partnership is key as we move forward to keep that lean governmental structure. So, but Madam Chair, any questions, I'll be glad to work with you.
Representative Epps, you want to mash your button?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, we thank you for your hard work. So, I wasn't here when the Commissioner of Economic Development explained those $63 million and the 35. Can you help me to understand that?
Those were some funds. I think last year we got over, John was 100. I got my finance guy. If I keep looking over here, you know, he knows my dumb look, which is pretty bad. You got it right. Okay, it was roughly $100 million, Mr. Rep, that was put in there. And as you know, these are challenging times with the budget, and I think we knew that we weren't going to. All that money was not going to be obligated in 1 year. So over time, as we need those funds, it will come back into play. Okay. We're not going to lose any projects long term. And right now, Representative, we've got in that $5 million in process there on different deals that are being worked with roughly, and $4 million in reserve. So we have funds, you know, to go forward. So we have we're going to work closely together to be sure that we don't miss any opportunities. Private sector job growth is job one. That's what we've got to do. That's what will keep us out and move us out of any recession. So we're really focused in that area, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Commissioner, for
Thank
coming,
you.
and thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am.
GFA, Kevin Clark. There you are. I was looking around for you. Good to have you here today.
Drove everybody out of the room.
They're all leaving.
They're all leaving?
They're all leaving.
I tell you.
It's under it's 16.
We have page 21, item
16.12.
And we just have one item in the amended budget.
And that's the one item I want to talk to you about.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Okay. The whole budget for the Georgia Rural Water Association is $298,000.
That's just our payment to them. They have a much larger budget and do a lot more work for various entities besides us. So, but that's just our contribution to them.
Okay. Well, there's another half a year going.
Yes, ma'am.
So, you know, they had budgeted things for the rest of the year, and you cut up the whole year's contribution.
What we've talked to Rural Water about is that knowing what the services they provide are primarily circuit riders, testing, things of that nature that are difficult at best to cut, that we will, within GFA, scrape together the dollars to get through this fiscal year. But that's about all we can do for them. So Jimmy and his crew are going to work with us and try to minimize what that impact is, but we're going to, you know, they're all the way through. I mean, you know, they're way into it. So there's no contract that we could really, there's a contract, but we couldn't just say stop because it's already halfway done, at least halfway.
Right, it's halfway
Yes,
done.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just didn't understand how you could cut the whole thing when
I don't think that pragmatically it would be very difficult. So that's what we're scraping together.
Some of the services have already been done.
They've been done, yes, ma'am. Yes.
So you're working with them, and y'all going to...
Yes, ma'am. We'll get them to the end.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Oh, and empty the room for that.
Oh. If there are no other questions,
Thank you so much.
you just had that one item. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks. Okay. What do we got now? Greta. Ms. Miller. And that you'll find that on 16.13. It's under Community Affairs too. Thank you, Ms. Miller, for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me to speak today. My voice is a little hoarse, so I apologize. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes, we are attached to the Department of Community Affairs, so we are on our two line items are on page 6 in section 16.3. And what I'd like to do, if I could, is walk through the PowerPoint with you. I know this is probably the last topic of the day, so I will be brief, but I would like to take the opportunity to tell you about Express and a little bit more about the budget request that's there. On slide 2, you'll see just generally what Greta does.
Okay, somehow I didn't get one. Did you get one? Does everybody got a PowerPoint? Okay. Did y'all get one? Okay. What do you need, Ann? Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't get one.
Do you have one now? Are you all set?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I got one now. Okay.
So just briefly, Greta does a handful of things. The most prominent one that's external facing to the Georgians is the operation of Express Commuter Coach through private contractors. We also evaluate and approve the Atlanta Regional Commission's short-range transportation investment plans, and those are particularly important in this post-referendum world where we have to make sure that every dollar of current revenue streams are spent effectively and efficiently. We also are charged in state law with reviewing opportunities for coordination and streamlining of rural and human services transit. That is typically provided through other agencies, whether it's Department of Human Services, Department of Community Health, and Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, looking for opportunities to cross-cut administration and streamlining trip provision to make sure costs stay low and customer service stays high. So we're charged with that in state law and reviewing that. We also administer the region's van pool network. There's about 320 van pools that run throughout North Georgia, and we contract with private providers and citizens for that. And then finally, another statutory role is the review of developments of regional impact in our budget. That's addressed as well. So
Can
to
I
the
ask
next.
you one
Yes,
question?
ma'am.
The Georgia Transit Association, does that come under the things that they do come under you?
The Georgia Transit Association is a group of transit providers from throughout the state. We are a member.
You're a member.
We're a member, but we're not affiliated
you don't look
otherwise.
over their budgets and everything.
No.
Okay. Who looks over their budgets? And
You know, they do not receive any state funding to my knowledge.
They're a trade group of transit organizations, so they have their own board and get dues from member transit agencies.
okay, and so they have all federal funds.
Well, it's whatever funds that the transit systems that are members provide.
Okay, but I'm trying to find. Maybe I'm not asking my questions right. Okay, not the associate. Like I have a transit. Forget the association. I have in my area. I have a bus that goes around and picks up people.
Right.
Who manages that? In Berrien County, a real rural area.
Your local government would be the county.
The local government.
And with federal funds, probably a very small amount of state dollars and local dollars.
Okay, that's what I.
As well as potentially some passenger fares.
Okay, I had seen something, and I was trying to find out what. I'd had a question about some things I'd seen, and I couldn't find out who to ask them to. So
it could be your local government, and Georgia DOT has a transit division.
Georgia DOT,
and they can
okay.
probably help tremendously with that.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next slide, it's just picture tells 1,000 words. This is a graphic that was done. No, we did not clear the downtown connector and put people in chairs there. But what you see there is essentially the infrastructure space that is saved by folks riding on Express and in van pools and carpools. Each of our buses carries up to 57 passengers that can sit down, and we can carry an extra 15 folks standing. But this is a visual that shows if those folks were in cars, how much infrastructure they would take up, how much congestion they would cause. But instead, by riding on our coaches and van pools, a great deal of savings are occurring there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide shows the Express map. We do have a broad reach in Georgia. We have 33 routes that are served by 175 coaches. We have 28 park and ride lots in 12 counties, but we draw ridership from well beyond those counties. And then the next slide has a map. 2 slides from now has a map to show you that. Our ridership by home county is relatively distributed throughout the Atlanta region. We do get a lot of ridership from Henry and Gwinnett counties, as well as Clayton. We have really tangible impacts with these 2.4 million boardings. It takes 1.5 million cars off the road and saves Georgians 5 million gallons of gas a year. That includes our riders and all the folks who are not sitting in traffic congestion. If they're driving in their car and the Express rider is not in their car in front of them on the coach, then they're not sitting in traffic, not wasting fuel. The next slide does show the map. This is slide 6. It's been a smart investment for Georgia. It's cost effective, well managed, and satisfies customer needs. So a little bit more numbers around the savings, that infrastructure savings, because our riders are not in their single occupant vehicles headed to downtown, midtown, and Buckhead. It saves traffic congestion costs for everybody else on the road to the tune of $140 million a year. That's in wasted time and wasted fuel that they don't have to realize because of Express taking just that amount of riders off the road. That's a 4-to-1 return on investment if you consider the operating expenditures and the capital budgeting. So it was a very smart investment for Georgia to get this system running, and it improves our capacity. It's a scalable service model. We do often switch around our service where we are finding that markets aren't generating enough ridership. We'll pull back departures, or if we need more, we have a lot of standees, we'll ramp up more departures from there. It's very nimble. And on the Express toll lanes, it provides an opportunity for folks not to have to pay the toll, but still get the reliable commute and get delivered all the way downtown to their destination. In the well-managed system category, we outsource to private providers. We have 4 different contractors. Also, all of our bus drivers and maintenance crews are private contractors paid for through our budget, but it is outsourced. We find it to be a very good model. We have strong fiscal controls and financial management. This past year, we just went through zero-based budgeting, so the numbers that you see in front of you are reflective of that. And we have a 91% customer satisfaction level, so we do satisfy commuter demands, travel needs for our major companies: SunTrust, AT&T, Southern Company, Georgia Pacific, and the Federal Center. And before I get into our budget, I'm just wondering if there might be any questions at this point. Okay. The last slide is a slide that gives a visual of our operating funds and how they exhaust. They become exhausted in fiscal 13. To get us through this period of time, you all, through the appropriations process, the amended budget last year, afforded us $5.4 million. That's going to get us through about the May timeframe, depending on how much passenger fares come in and what fuel costs are. So that is the nature of the $567,000 recommendation for Express to get us through the remainder of this fiscal year. If we do get the opportunity to come back to you and speak with you more about the full fiscal 14 budget, we'll talk more about the specifics of what happens in the next year. The $8.1 million is something that's in the governor's budget for fiscal 14. That will get us through approximately 3/4 of the next fiscal year in covering our operating dollars. And what the state dollars actually do is fund the bus drivers and fund the fuel in the gas tank. We can maintain our buses almost all day long with federal dollars and with passenger fares that come in. But folks would get on the bus and sit there. If the buses don't roll, they're not going to be able to get to their destination, and that's what the state funds pay for. Once again, the bus driver fares and the fuel.
Did I turn this off? Representative Black.
Do I understand this last chart that this is funding that was anticipated coming from the T-Splosh?
That is correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
And it's, looking at this chart, it shows a gap in there between fiscal year 13 and the July 31 vote.
Yes.
And down below, you show the county funds being struck out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were the other county funds that was anticipated that funded up to the T-Splosh or up until actually that T-Splosh revenue would not have been available as soon as it passed. So is there county funds being taken out?
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
The anticipated T-Splosh funds.
Mm-hmm. There's two different aspects going on here. One, the county funds that you see there was an original infusion from county governments back in 2003 and 2004 timeframe that we stretched out to last us for 7-8 years worth of operations. So those are the county funds that are through this fiscal year are exhausted. The referendum, that, unlike MARTA, we don't have a dedicated fund source. You know, there's a 1% sales tax that goes from Fulton into CAB to pay for to subsidize MARTA's operations. We don't have that, but this would have been that had the referendum passed in Metro Atlanta. We would have been able to continue operations of Express for another 10 years without coming back to the General Assembly. Unfortunately, this was the one project that was impacted day one when the referendum failed, and so therefore, to keep the service rolling. That is the ask, but it would have been the referendum dollars had it passed.
Thank you, Representative Black, for pointing that out. Any further questions? Okay. All right. If you mash your button, I'll turn you on.
There are some super routes, for an example, from Mobile to Atlanta. Do we have any other routes that's coming into Georgia? And I know it doesn't fall under your auspices, but
are you speaking of the megabus or the
yes.
super shuttle? The megabus is completely private. There's no government dollars that go into that, to my knowledge. It does not fall under our purview in any regulatory sense or any coordinated fashion. And the megabus does serve multiple destinations: Chattanooga, Charlotte, Orlando. It's a wide-reaching service.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there any other questions for anybody while we're here? Thank you, and we'll see y'all when we take up the 2014 budget. Thanks so much.